painted from earliest memory. And I used to, as a child, haunt the National Gallery, mostly, in London. And I went initially with my father. I'd always be drawn to what was then Room 24, the Flemish Primitive School, Van Eyck, Memling, people like that. And I thought it was remarkable, quite miraculous, this work. And I remember asking my father, I was very young, why is the rest of it not as good as this? And he said, he sort of gave me a wry smile and said, well, this is bloody difficult, that's probably why. I found those paintings opened up a completely different world. It's like a sort of parallel reality. It's not realism, it's a sort of nearly realism. You break down the components of observed reality and you build them up again into a slightly amplified, morphed form. And so you end up with a sort of magical realism, which is parallel to observed reality, but not quite there. Most people, I suppose most painters nowadays would be operating with acrylic on canvas, which I'm not particularly interested in. I think that's quite limiting. And I've played around with a lot of different approaches to painting in my time, obviously from abstraction through alla prima painting, oil on canvas, acrylic on canvas, watercolour. But this is the most it's the most challenging but the most rewarding kind of medium. I've been exploring this medium for over 30 years, 35 years, trying to understand what goes into I suppose it's an alchemical process really, to get it right. And to a degree that alchemical process is part of the meditation of production. But actually it's the end result that I'm interested in. If there were easier ways of getting to that end result, I would use them. I'm not doing this out of any sense of nostalgia. I'm sequestering an ancient and actually long abandoned technique because I think it has great aesthetic possibilities. The process is quite meditative and it's very, it's not for the impatient, shall we say. You need to have a lot of time and a lot of experience, I think, it's easy to get it wrong. I work on panel. The panels are brushed with many layers of gesso, which is applied warm, and then it's sanded. Then I put an imprimatura on, as they would have called it, a carnation. And then I will build up the underpainting entirely in egg tempera, and then the painting will be finished, as it were. The second half of the process will be in oil. It's the only way I can achieve this remarkable, I can only describe it as a sort of backlighting. You have an inner depth, a glow of saturation of colour. There's a translucency, there are possibilities of translucency you can get with this technique, which I can't see that you can get in any other way of painting, and it's something I've always been interested in. And it's exposing, it's not easy painting because you can't afford to make mistakes because you ruin the piece. So when you're painting wet into wet or when you're painting wet onto dry, all of those things have to be very carefully considered, and if you make a mistake, you're going to have to redo all the layers and it'll show. Even though it's the most infuriating technique, it's the most rewarding at the same time. Typically, I'm only working on one painting at a time. I might be preparing other ideas which are formulating and gestating and coming through, and there might be intensive mind sketching, but I will be working on one painting and carrying it through. My work is philosophical. Obviously, it is largely allegorical, and there's a lot of metaphor. There's a lot of symbolism. There's a language of symbolism that is woven through. But all of this is to do with the condition of man, woman, me, everyone now in this society. I suppose if there's a unifying theme, it might be man's infinite capacity for folly, my infinite capacity for folly. I'm not finger wagging and observing in a sort of remote way. I mean, I'm generally included in the paintings that I do. I don't want them to appear moralistic either. I just want them to be journalistic. I mean, they are describing the condition of what it is to be alive now. They're not safe, easy, pretty salon paintings. They're supposed to be edgy and challenging and confronting. They're supposed to be a sort of mirror. We look into the mirror. We don't always like what we see in the mirror, but I think it's important to hold that up. Gwydir is what I call a special needs house. It's a pretty demanding place to live. It's an extraordinary place to live and very inspiring, and all my work is generated here from it. If anything is my muse, Gwydir is my muse. And I divide my time between my painterly work and Gwydir. When we came here, we were pretty penniless. It was an aspirant ruin, and so we've put our lives into restoring it. The other side of this two-sided coin has been my work. So they're very much indivisible. There is always that dialogue between my work and Gwydir. I work up in the studio at the top of the solar tower, entombed and engloomed in this 15th century, late 15th century environment, and it means that I'm completely cut off. And there are reasons for that, because one has to be time disciplined in a place like Gwydir, because it'll otherwise sequester all your time. It has been a remarkable journey and continues to be that. In a sense, what I do here is an escape from Gwydir, but also a summation of the frequency and juice that I get out of Gwydir. As there are so many different layers of history, of archaeology, of time here, so I try to imbue these paintings with layers and layers. So there are technical layers, but also layers of comprehension. And so all this jumble of things, I think in a curious way, it is very Gwydir. I mean, I think the paintings are very of Gwydir in that sense, because of those layers. There's a compulsion to paint. I have to do it. I don't know where that comes from, but it's part of that philosophical aspect of trying to make sense of a bizarre world that you see around you. It's a questing for sense and truth and order, perhaps. The works themselves may well be provocative, but they're designed to be contemplative. And when I'm doing them, I'm very much in a contemplative, meditative state. I don't know, that sounds too bizarre, but when the painting's going at its best, you lose all sense of time. In a sense, the best passages in any painting, I'm generally aware I haven't done. I mean, we live in a world, how can I say it, where humility is not exactly a prized virtue anymore. And I think there's some validity to humility in art.